John Birch Society report. George Washington stated, "Truth will ultimately prevail where pain is taken to bring it to light." Truth is the major weapon of the John Birch Society report. We will return after these words from our sponsor. The John Birch Society report presents this weekly broadcast to bring you commentary and analysis of today's events. Our commentator today is Mr. Thomas J. Anderson, President and Editor-in-Chief of Southern Farm Publications. Well known as the columnist and humorist, Mr. Anderson has previously been heard on the John Birch Society report. Mr. Anderson's topic today is hate groups.
An old love song goes, "Sometimes I love you, sometimes I hate you, but when I hate you, it's 'cause I love you." Back in the olden days when I was a teenager, one of the favorite retorts during a lover's spat was, "No, I don't hate you. I don't care that much." For 7 years, the John Birch Society and other patriotic groups have cared enough about God and country to actively oppose the collectivists who knowingly or unknowingly are taking us to socialism, insolvency, surrender, and ultimate slavery under the anti-God, communist-controlled Trojan horse, the United Nations. On the average, John Birchers are the most courageous, dedicated, patriotic, and religious people of any group I have ever known. But in America today, liberty lovers who care enough to stand up and be counted are smeared as hate peddlers. Actually, the real haters are those guilty people who hate such patriots for exposing the awful truth about them. Every patriotic organization and anti-communist from Martin Dies on down who has effectively opposed the internal communist menace has been hated and smeared. Walter Reuther, part owner of the Johnson Frontier, is one of the driving forces behind the smear-bun directory known as Group Research. This hate group specializes in hating people who support the Constitution of the United States and who oppose socialism and communism. They are out to give the treatment not to anti-Americans like Lee Harvey Oswald, but to great American heroes like Captain Eddie Rickenbacker. I am flattered to be listed in the Group Research Directory along with such dangerous Americans as Clarence Mannion, Herbert Fildrick, Ronald Reagan, Dr. Revelo Oliver, Admiral Chester Ward, Dr. George Benson, Reed Benson, son of Ezra Taft Benson, former Secretary of Agriculture, Reverend Carl McIntyre, Dr. Billy James Hargis, and Dr. Walter Judd, among others. The great fear of the collectivists is that we will have a rebirth of McCarthyism. They hate McCarthy, the great American patriot, but they don't hate the unrepentant liar and traitor Alger Hiss. They don't hate the anti-American, anti-God killer Khrushchev, or Tito, or Gomulka, or Brezhnev, Kosygin. They don't hate Mao Zedong, Castro, or any of the liberal mice who nest with the comrades. Or, if they are people who hate the deed and not the doer, they hate the methods of McCarthy, but not the methods of our socialist vice president, Hubert Humphrey, or such all-American demagogues as the Louisiana Congressman Hale Boggs. The so-called liberals help, not hate the communists. Ralph McGill proclaims, quote, "The organized forces of hate now alive in America may destroy us," close quote. But he doesn't mean the communists and socialists may destroy us. He means the anti-communists and the anti-collectivists. The planners have created, through the kept press and networks, the impression that those who oppose the administration are hate mongers. This, of course, is the earmark of dictatorship. The government is always right. In a dictatorship, one does not oppose the government, right or wrong, even when it plans to surrender the Panama Canal to the enemy. In a free nation, one can not only oppose, but one has the right to be wrong. Under the FCC regulations, conservative radio TV commentators like Dr. Carl McIntyre, Dan Smoot, and Dean Mannion are losing stations because the stations must give equal time free to anyone who wants to present the other side of a so-called controversial subject. What's controversial? Whatever opposes the administration line. For instance, if Dean Mannion opposes foreign aid, that's controversial. But if Dean Rusk is promoting the Communist and Cannibal Club on the East River, the United Nations, that's not controversial. We haters are accused of intolerance. One of the greatest national weaknesses today is an excess of tolerance. Let us not mistake ignorance or cowardice for tolerance. One is not capable of tolerance unless one has a conviction. A person unable to arrive at convictions is a person morally immature. The comrades have enslaved 750 million people since the so-called end of World War II, and the Big Red Army didn't fire a shot. They did it all from within, even though the actual communists in no country they took over ever exceeded 4% of the population. Yet we are constantly told by our leaders, our press and pulpit, that communism is not the real danger. The communists are mellowing, you know. The real danger is the anti-communists, they say. Many socialists claim that they are anti-communist. Senator Strom Thurmond, that great American beacon, explains the liberal fraud this way, quote, "Since Marxist socialists share the ultimate goal of the communists, their opposition to communism is limited. These Marxist socialists in our country support anti-communism only so long as it is aimed exclusively at the communist armed threat. They want world socialism controlled by themselves, not the Russians or Chinese. The socialists look forward to an international socialist order just as the communists do, except that they, the socialists, are dedicated to the evolutionary rather than the revolutionary approach. The collectivists purr, oh sure, communism as it is now practiced is bad, but before we fight it, we have to fight the most pressing evils in our midst, such as segregation, organized crime, hunger amidst plenty, unemployment, juvenile delinquency, and so forth. These same people never argued that these or other so-called evils, real or imaginary, should have been fought before we fought Nazism and fascism. Yet there was never a time when Hitler and Mussolini and all their combined cohorts then and since were nearly as close to enslaving the world as the communists are now. Why do the liberals hate fascists but not communists? For some people, the breed of the dog determines the ache of the bite. Why are the self-proclaimed liberals so violently opposed to rightist dictators like Chiang Kai-shek, Batista, and Franco, and so neutral about the dictators of the left like Castro, Tito, and Gamarca? Tyranny is tyranny by any name. But whereas Franco is a good, benign dictator, Mao Zedong is guilty of incredible brutalities involving millions of his own people. Mao Zedong, the so-called agrarian reformer, has also murdered more millions than Hitler ever dreamed of. Let it be said in Mao Zedong's defense, however, that he looked after them after they were dead. He had their bodies ground up and spread on the land for fertilizer. Hitler was more wasteful. He burned bodies. After our liberal leaders get Mao Zedong into the United Nations, they will doubtless teach him the error of his ways. He should learn that China's agricultural problem can't be solved with organic fertilizers. If we ship him our surplus chemicals as foreign aid, he will doubtless mellow and love us. One world socialist, Orville Freeman, Secretary of Agriculture, has proposed, while representing himself to be of sound mind, that we institute a surplus disposal program for industry, such as agriculture's dumping plan. Then the American taxpayer could pay American industry to give more goodies to enemies like Russia, thus solving our unemployment problem. Every effective anti-communist is labeled fascist. Thus the planners try to make people think that communism and fascism are opposites. Communism and fascism are not opposites. They are blood brothers, two peas in the same pod. Hitler called his regime National Socialism, remember? The same as Stalin and Khrushchev have called their brand of tyranny National Socialism. Communism and fascism are not at opposite ends. They're at the same end of the spectrum. They both mean total government, all-powerful. Close by them is their first cousin, socialism, which is communism, fascism without the firing squad, until firing squads become necessary. They all mean big government and little people. On the other end of the spectrum is anarchy, no government. Thus the real extremes are total government and no government. We who are trying to restore our constitutional republic are not really extremists. There is no menace from the anarchist right. The menace is all from the left. And that menace is not simply from the communists. It's from the socialists who are delivering us to the so-called mellowing communists. I don't believe in calling mere leftists communists. I don't particularly care whether they're communists or not. Some of our non-communist idealists, opportunists, pacifists, and half-brights who promote the communist aims and programs are far more dangerous than party members. For example, Gus Hall, head American Comrade, is not nearly as dangerous as somebody like Dr. John Bennett, Dean of the Union Theological Seminary, because the American people will not follow a known communist, but they will follow a misguided and deluded idealist, or whatever Dr. John Bennett is. Judge not, lest ye be judged, I've been told. I believe the Bible, King James Version, and I believe that means that we should be willing to be measured by the same standards we expect of others. The Bible also says, by their fruits ye shall know them. If we are to save our republic from dictatorship, we must be both fruit inspector and judge. The communists have abolished God, but so far God has been more tolerant.
We want to thank all those who've taken time to listen to the John Birch Society Report, which has again focused attention on important subjects directly involving you. Our commentator today has been Thomas J. Anderson. If you would like a copy of today's message, please send 50 cents for one copy or $1 for 3 copies to the John Birch Society Report, San Marino, California. Please enclose a stamped, self-addressed envelope.